It's gonna be alright.
Welcome to another episode of Johnversations. I'm John Graham here at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Orlando, Florida, and I am so excited to have with me Jim and Shannon Porteaux. Porteaux. I want to say that right. I want to make
you
sure
nailed it.
The right emphasis and the right syllable, or however you're supposed to say that.
Don't ask me to say it twice.
Yeah,
I might mess it up.
Sorry. Okay, so Jim and Shannon, you guys are. Where are you from?
We live just south of Nashville, Tennessee at this point.
Okay, but you had some time in New England. We talked about that a minute ago.
Yeah, we spent about 17, 18 years in New England
Wow.
between Connecticut and Massachusetts.
So, former pastor, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but also you've got a book out called Hope is Where the Heart Is. So, tell me what led to this book. What's the backstory here?
Well, we've been through a lot in our life, and of course, most people have. But the key here is we really wanted to communicate to people, no matter what you've done, no matter what's been done to you, no matter what you've been through, gone through, no matter what, you can have hope. And all we need to do is find that source of hope. Now, we believe that it's found in Christ, but also there's a source of hope that can be found in the ability that God's placed in us to be able to find answers. And that's where we push through. We talk a lot about my childhood. We talk a lot about our marriage and things like that.
Well, let's get into the dirty details because all of this goodness came from a lot of rough stuff.
It really did.
Yeah. So fill us in.
Well, the book came out of, there were three people that came to me and said, you need to write a book. And I said, I'm not a writer. I'm a halfway good speaker. So there's no way I'm going to put anything down on paper. And I had a good friend that told me that. Then my pastor told me that. And then I had a client that I was working with. And about a year and a half into our relationship, he had heard my story, looked at me. We were sitting down one day and he looked me straight in the eye, stopped out of nowhere. And he said, Jimmy, you need to write a book. And I laughed because I said, you've not read my writings, obviously. But he said, no, you need to write a book. And in fact, we feel so strongly about that we're willing to take you on as a client, you and Shannon on as a client, and we will help to pay for this book.
Wow.
I mean, and if you understand what's behind that,
Yeah.
It's a tremendous investment from these people. But they believed in the story, and their heart from it every time, and Shannon will confer on it or will agree, is that they said, if we help one person, we think this is a success.
Wow.
And God knows we've already seen that. So it came out of just giving people hope, because we live in a time right now where hope is a fleeting, valuable piece of our life that we need.
Yeah. So, Shannon, we'll get to you in just a minute, but there's some stuff from your childhood that sparked all of this.
Yeah.
And it's not, the idea is not necessarily to dwell on that, but it helps to give us some context.
Well, I agree. Scripture tells us they overcame him by the word of the Lamb, or the blood of the Lamb, rather, and the word of their testimony. And I think to myself of how strong we have to have a testimony that talks about what God's brought us through. And sometimes you got to talk about the bad stuff we did to get us there, because He's a rescuer.
Yeah.
And but we make decisions in life, but they're not necessarily connected to just the moment. Many times, it comes from our past. It comes from decisions and thoughts and influences. And my mom and dad divorced when I was around 8 years old. Dad disappeared at that point, not because he's an evil human, because he's broken as well, and he was trying to figure out life. My mom at that point had no real formal education or anything. We moved to a place called Karen Crow, Louisiana, a little bitty hole in a single wide, short, rusted out trailer home. Now, that may not mean anything to anybody. We went from a middle class family to utter poverty in the spheres about 6 months.
Yeah.
Mom felt she needed someone, and so she would find a man, and she'd fall in love with that man, and then she'd marry him, and then a few months later she'd fall out of love and divorce that guy. And so I have 11 stepdads. Now,
Wow.
That didn't cause me to do anything that I've done, but it did put an influence in me, that thought about having to be replaceable, that you need to earn, and things like that. And I don't know if you can even imagine how much Father's Day would cost me to try to take care of that. But that had an influence. And also during the early years of that, I was molested by my great-grandmother and a cousin and someone else, all around a church setting, so to speak. So there were some negativisms, I think, that were inside of me from that. The blessings that I come out of that, though, is that God somehow placed in my heart at that point, and I couldn't identify it then, but it was the mentality of, you just got to make it through today. It's tough right now, but take another step. And when you get through this day tomorrow, there's enough grace in God and enough information to discover that you can find the peace and hope that you need.
Yeah. So, Shannon, let's fast forward a little ways. You guys found each other. You got married. How did these kind of things start to percolate up in your relationship and cause some struggles?
Well, to me, everything was actually great, I thought.
Yeah.
I didn't even see it coming, to be honest with you. We had been married almost 20 years, And every day I woke up to my husband telling me, I love you, I'm never going anywhere, I'm not doing anything, to one day, I'm quitting everybody, you, and I love your best friend. So
Wow.
it just kind of happened. I never even really saw it coming. I didn't even know. But I knew that it wasn't Jimmy who was doing this. It was not the same person that I knew and fell in love with. So
Wow.
it was difficult.
Okay, so talk about that. Fill us in some blanks, Jim.
Wow. How long do you have?
Well,
You know, one of the things Shannon said, and she continues to say today, is that Jimmy was a good guy doing a bad thing. And she was truthful in that. I mean, I did everything I could. I had become a person who I'd built walls, and we all have those.
Sure.
And on the other side of the wall, I put this picture of what I thought I needed to be, to say, to think for those people to accept me.
Mm-hmm.
And I do it at home and at church and everybody else. I didn't know who I was. I was whatever you needed me to be. People say you're a people pleaser. I said, I don't know. I was just eat up with being accepted.
Right.
Does that resonate with you?
Of course, yeah.
You know, and it breaks my heart today because I know that's the thing I still struggle with. It won't matter, and maybe that's just something that keeps me humble or at least attempts to. I don't know, but I can tell you that I walked up to her and she had no idea, and it was a beautiful day in our beautiful home, and I looked her in her eyes and I just like this, John, I said, I don't love you anymore. I didn't know any other ways to say it, and this beautiful woman who had done nothing but been an amazing part of my life was absolutely destroyed. You know, I watched those eyes. I watched what happened at that moment, and it was just a few days later that I was gone.
Wow.
You know, we all try to put our best foot forward. It wasn't just putting your best foot forward. I believed in order to be loved, you had to earn it. And I thank God we don't have to earn that today with him.
Wow, ain't that the truth? So we can't sit in this bad part of the story.
Oh, no.
We got to move to the good part. Tell me how you journeyed your way back, or maybe not even back, but into a new reality, you know?
Well, I love in the Old Testament, it says the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time.
Yes.
And I'm very grateful he comes a fourth and a fifth.
Right.
You know, he's very long-suffering. You know, I left, and at that point, of course, I'm unemployed. I'm broke. I move in with my father and my mother in Tennessee. You know, we're supposed to leave the house. I move in. I've got no friends, and I don't blame the people. People in church didn't know what to do with it, John.
Yeah.
What do you do? They don't know. And so they pray and they stay out of the way. Again, I feel alone, so who do I go to? I start going to the people who will accept me. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And so my life went pretty bad for a while, pretty poor. All the time Shannon's praying, she's working on herself physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. She's becoming the best version that God can make in her while still loving me from afar because I wouldn't speak to her. I said evil things to her, John, that I hate to even admit today. We put a lot of stuff in the book. And people say you're so raw, and it's because we don't have an opportunity in these days to be fake anymore. Why would we want to do that? And it's just it doesn't accomplish the goal of letting people see that God takes broken people and He does miracles with them, right? And so I went away. It was really bad. I started a little construction company and was working really hard trying to do that because it's hard for an out-of-work preacher to find a job, especially if he's committed adultery. And so I'm working really hard. Shannon's praying, and a lot of negative events happened in my life that led me to a place where Shannon and I started talking again. I received a text from her, and she had said, hey, if you want to talk sometime, let's talk. Well, I heard that text and said, yeah, okay, fine. And I replied back, sure, that'd be cool. I wasn't no longer with this other woman. I wasn't really doing anything. I just was trying to figure life out at that point. God, though, was steadily putting people in my path that would speak faith. Not condemnation, but they would talk to me about how, that they cared about me.
Yeah.
And it was God working through that. I called Shannon, and I sent Shannon this text. Right after she got the text, she calls me, John. She says, hey, I got your text. I'm thinking to myself, oh, why did I send that text? Because I have no hope for us at this point.
Yeah.
Zero. She says, yeah, well, how are you doing? And we small talk for a while. And finally she says, well, if you want to talk more, let's talk. And I said, okay, well, let's do that. She goes, well, why don't you come to San Antonio? Well, she had been flying to San Antonio, got there. It was her brother's wedding. I was supposed to perform it, by the way, as a minister. That's not happening.
Right.
She says, well, why don't you come to San Antonio? And I said, I can't come to San Antonio. Number one, in Texas, they can kill you just because you have it coming to you. I've earned enough damage there. Number two, Shannon, I can't afford to come. I've been working, but I have no money. I am broke. I almost can't say this 15 years later without repeating it. She said, you have something to write with? I said, yeah. She goes, take my credit card number. After a year and a half of not being connected, after leaving her, embarrassing her, saying those vile things to this woman, she put her money where her mouth was with zero promise. But faith is the substance of things hoped for.
Wow. Okay, Shannon, your turn.
Okay.
That takes a lot of grace. How did you receive that grace and enough to offer it?
I guess during that time, as Jim talked about, I was working on myself. I was getting to know God too. I think I know a lot of the time what probably led to some of the things that happened in our past is I put Jim sometimes on that pedestal because he was my husband and he was a minister, and so I did kind of that, but I started looking towards God and working on me. And I remember talking with God, and at one point, and I was praying, and I was asking him, you got to make Jimmy love me. This is not what's supposed to happen. He's a minister. I mean, you're God. Why is this happening? And I'll never forget when I really felt God expressing on my heart that he was not going to make Jimmy love me. And I didn't understand that at first, but I realized after just more time with him, because God doesn't make us love him. It's a choice that we freely get to choose to love God, who loves us unconditionally. And so I was like, okay. So then I was like, if you're not going to make him love me, then help me to know how to pray. So my prayer changed that instead of him changing him to love me, that it would work and soften Jimmy's heart. And, and then I also said, God, I can't do this anymore, meaning I can't be all consumed about this relationship or Jimmy and everything all the time, because it was killing me inside.
Yeah.
And I remember, it's funny, I was getting into a shower on a February, and I said, in a March, and I said, God, I can't do this anymore. If you want this marriage to work, and if you want us together and move forward, it's up to you. And then in April, I was going to my dad's, and I got the text from him.
Wow.
And it's funny because we were on the plane, and my dad was telling me about, my dad's a believer, but he thinks that Christians think all we have to do is pray and that's it, and God's going to do whatever. And he's like, you just might as well forget it. God's not going to make him come back. He's not going to. I was like, but I understand he's not going to make him, but I'm going to have faith that it's going to happen. If it's meant to be, it will happen. And so as soon as I got off the plane and I had the text, I was like, hey, Dad, guess what? I got a text.
Wow.
And so
God used your faithfulness to minister to your dad and certainly to minister to Jim. And so you've got a lot of fuel for a book about hope. So tell me a little bit about the book and what are some principles that you've put together through all of this?
Well, there's a number of principles that we go into. One of the key ones is understanding why people disconnect. And, we talk about money and in-laws and outlaws and all kids and all kind of different things. And those are contributing factors. There's 25 years of research, believe it or not. Dr. John Gottman did a research, 25-year literature review on everything written on marriage and divorce. And what he came up with is that the reasons people divorce are because they feel their spouse doesn't love, like, or respect them. It's equal across the board. Now, I know we've had discussion that men just won't respect and women won't love, but that's not what the data indicates. The data indicates that we want all the same things equally. Now, we see them differently, but we want them equally. And when that doesn't happen, we begin to protect ourselves, and that wall comes up. And as soon as the wall comes up, John, intimacy stops. And that's where we build passion, because the more I know you, so we're going to know each other. I'm like, I like this guy, John. He's a snappy dresser. I can't grow a beard if my life depends on it. He's got a great one, but we get along. Well, the more we are able to share and find acceptance, and even the stuff we don't agree about. Yeah. Because that's where real intimacy is formed, not where we all agree. Jesus said, it's easy to hug and like and forgive those who are your friends. Yeah. But how do you show that to someone you don't understand? And so with husbands and wives and people in relationship in general, one of the things we do is we work so hard to catch, and then we forget those things that we caught them with the respect, with the love. And so that's a key element in there, is to be able to take down these walls, the bricks, hand them over to one another in a safe manner so that they take care of that brick and continue to bring bricks down. And if I bring bricks down, Shannon brings bricks down, we will establish a clearer view of who we are behind that wall. And then we can make decisions of acceptance and demonstrate that I love you.
Wow. Okay, so the last 2.5 minutes of this interview is enough for you to go buy this book because that's really fantastic stuff.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
We're blessed.
Well, okay, so the book is called Hope is Where the Heart Is. And where can folks find it?
Literally anywhere.
Anywhere books are sold.
Anywhere
right?
a book is sold. We also have it on Amazon and Kindle and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, okay. And how can folks connect with you and your ministry and this?
Yeah, grab us at jimporteau.com, JimPorteau.com, and we'll love to connect with you.
All right, Jim Porteaux, I'm reading your name tag, Pourteau. It's kind of Louisiana.
It's Cajun 100%, brother.
All right, so check it out. Thanks so much for
Thank
being
you.
with us, Jim and Tammy. It's just a joy. Just a joy. I'm Shannon. I just called you Tammy.
Yeah, I've been there too.
I'm sorry, Jim and Shannon. So we're so grateful. And hey, just remember, it's not just a conversation; it's a John-versation. And until next time, it's going to be all right.